December 2, 1961. The University of Colorado football team was in the locker room enjoying a 29-12 victory over the Air Force Academy. The Big Eight champions were on their way to play in the Orange Bowl against LSU on New Year's Day, 1962. Fans outside tossed oranges onto the field, while in the locker room, CU President Quigg and athletic director Harry Carlson, along with Orange Bowl officials, joined the players in a raucous celebration. Everyone was there except team captains Joe Romig and Charlie McBride. Suddenly, the duo walked in from another room and announced that the Buffaloes were not going to play due to Miami's racial segregation policies. The Orange Bowl and the city would relent, allowing the entire team to travel, live, and eat together in Florida, and the game against LSU was played. It was not the first or the last time that CU took a principled stand against racism. Game Changers of the Century is a 4-part documentary series produced by CU Boulder alum Philip Hart. It sheds light on how college football was integrated, starting with Michigan State and Coach Duffy Daugherty in the 1950s, who recruited black student athletes from the Deep South, where the young men were shunned by white colleges there. This docuseries pays tribute to the schools that led the way to desegregation of college football. Michigan State, Tennessee, Wake Forest, Notre Dame, Houston, UCLA, Maryland, Arizona State, Oklahoma, Nebraska, Missouri, Auburn, North Carolina State, and SMU. Oh, and the University of Colorado. Dr. Hart and I sat down to discuss this groundbreaking moment and CU's role in changing the nation's history. Black and Gold family, we're in for a treat today. I have the honor of having what's become a very dear friend of mine, Dr. Philip Hart, CU grad, incredible gentleman. You become kind of one of my heroes, my friend, and I'm really looking forward to talking about this discussion we're having today about this docuseries you're putting together. Could you let me do this? Let me instead of me trying to set it up, tell me what it is you're working on. Give me a sense of where it's going. I know we start with Duffy Daugherty at Michigan State, and we want to dispel a couple of rumors, and I'll at least say this much. Everybody's always talked about this football game between Alabama and USC back in 1970, and how that game led to the integration of college football as we know it. But what you're talking about in your series is, no, it's not. It didn't start there. It really started a decade or more before that time with Coach Daugherty at Michigan State and others who came after him. So let me open the floor to you, sir, and talk about the series.
Well, the docuseries, the working title is Game Changers of the Century. And I'll kind of explain what that title means as we get into our conversation. But one of my good friends who Bijan Bain, who's lives in DC. He's currently doing some work in Thailand now, but he approached me last year to work on this docuseries about the integration of college football. And he was in contact with Tom Shanahan, who's a retired sports writer, worked for years in San Diego, now lives in Raleigh, North Carolina, who wrote a book, had a book coming out called The Right Thing to Do, the true story of the integration of college football. And two of the stories that are part of this integration of college football. One involves the University of Colorado, which I attended, played basketball there, was an honors graduate. I'm in the Heritage Hall of Distinguished Alumni. Another story, a major part of the story is Michigan State University, and I attended Michigan State, which is where I have my graduate degrees at Michigan State. So Bijan Bain told Tom, well, Phil Hart knows a lot about sports, and he went to both CU and MSU, so he knows a lot of the people that are involved in this whole story. So I got we kind of pulled together the three of us, and then I pulled in one of my friends in Denver, Von Regensberger, who's a filmmaker, director, a composer, and real estate owner. And because we had done a film together called a documentary called The Longest Walk, the story of Charles Burrell. Charlie Burrell is known as the Jackie Robinson of classical music, and that's currently on Prime Video and Tubi. So I pulled Vaughn in, and so the four of us were kind of the core of the production group, along with my wife Tanya, who's a MSU graduate. And then we pulled together an advisory board. Jimmy Ray, who played quarterback at Michigan State, Tony Dungy, Kavitha Davidson, who was a producer on Brian Gumbel's sports show on HBO, Robert Dean, formerly from Denver, like me, who East Denver High School, worked on Dateline as a producer on Dateline. Mike Terry, a retired sports journalist. Bill Overton was one of the first Black football players at Wake Forest University. Went on to be an actor and entrepreneur, and is married to Jane Kennedy Overton, who will eventually get involved in the project. And so that's kind of the core team that is pulling together this docuseries. It's a four-part series that will tell the true story of the integration of college football, which really dates to 1954, when Duffy Daugherty was named the head football coach at Michigan State University. So we kind of trace the disciples of Duffy, people who played for him or coached under him, who went to other schools like Notre Dame and Arizona State, Colorado, Nebraska, and didn't adhere to the quotas that universities put on the number of players they would have on their team, including USC at the time that Sam Bam Cunningham was on the team. They had maybe 7 or 8 Black players. Mm-hmm. Alabama had 0, right? And Bear Bryant was a coach. And as you made reference to, supposedly, as the myth goes, Bear Bryant had an epiphany after Sam Bam Cunningham ran all over the Alabama team. Bear Bryant had an epiphany and said, I got to go find me some Sam Bam Cunninghams.
It almost seemed ironic to me that a lot of the guys who would come back and beat those Southern schools were guys those Southern schools could have had. These were California boys or Michigan boys that were beaten. These are Georgia boys, Alabama boys, Louisiana boys, Texas.
Right.
Let's go back. I'm going to go back to Coach Duffy Daugherty. And for a lot of people, he is. People talk about Bo Schembechler and his influence, but Duffy Daugherty, in terms of Michigan football, is really, and Michigan State especially, is a really an iconic figure that a lot of people really don't give a lot of credit to. Let's talk about 1954, what was going on that year, and the decisions he made in terms of how he wanted to recruit young men to come to Michigan State.
Well, that's the year he became the head football coach. Biggie Munn, who was the coach to then, became the athletic director, and Duffy Daugherty became the successor. 1954, obviously Brown versus Board of Education. So we want to couch the docuseries, even though it's talking about the integration of college football, within what was happening in broader society. So 54, obviously Brown versus Board of Education, Thurgood Marshall, and what impact that had upon the desegregation of public schools in the United States. Same year, Duffy Daugherty becomes a coach. And Duffy was of the mind that I'm not going to abide by this so-called quota system that I can only have 4 or 5, 6 Black players. I'm going to recruit the best players I can. And if I can find a kid in Beaumont, Texas, who can't go to the University of Texas, then I'll try to figure out how to bring him to Michigan State. And so that was the kind of mindset that he had starting in 1954. Then as we trace the evolution of players who came to play for him, coaches on his staff, and then they kind of went off in their own direction to various schools, and they took the same mindset. I'm not going to abide by a so-called quota. I'm going to recruit the best players I can, wherever they come from, whether they're black or white or Samoan or whatever they might be. And Duffy was really the one who was the progenitor, of that attitude. And that was 1954, where he brought
Mhm.
that attitude in. The myth, as you referenced, is 1970, Alabama versus Birmingham. But Duffy and Michigan State and his disciples were busy working on integrating college football long before that 1970 game.
And we can't talk enough about um, the quota system because it wasn't just in football. I mean, I had a dear friend of mine, Woody Salisbury, played for
Yeah,
the Philadelphia with Will Chamberlain back in the day.
yeah,
And in the NBA, there was a quota system. You could only have no more than two or maybe even three blacks on a basketball team.
right,
And in fact, the team in St. Louis, they wanted zero blacks. So when they had the draft rights to Bill Russell, they traded him to Boston. So they
right.
didn't even want Bill Russell on their team.
Right. Brilliant
So
move, right? Brilliant move.
brilliant, yeah, I mean, how did that work out for St. Louis? So let's talk about because it wasn't just in college football. It was pro basketball. It was the NFL. It was
Right,
all these different arenas. I mean, it's kind of what gave rise to the AFL
right.
and the ABA down the road. But talk about this what a change it was for these young men. Um, and I'm probably going to assume even young women who got a chance to go to schools like Michigan State. What did that do for those families to be able to have that kind of opportunity to go someplace different?
Well, I think it created a whole range of opportunities for them. Going back to Bubba Smith again as an example, a kid from Beaumont, Texas, graduated high school in '63, can't go to the University of Texas. He wants the limelight, so he doesn't necessarily want to go play football at an HBCU. He wants to go play at a school that's on television every week, that plays in the big bowl games. And unfortunately, the HBCUs weren't in that position at that point in time. So his father, Willie Ray Smith, who was his high school coach, basically worked with Duffy to kind of form what we call the Underground Railroad, and sending his son to Michigan State, same area, Beaumont. You had Mel Farr, and Mel Farr went to UCLA. He came out the same year that Bubba came out of high school. So for them, it took them out of the South, a Jim Crow South, to communities, whether East Lansing or Los Angeles, who are a little more progressive in terms of race relations. And it probably opened their eyes to what are the possibilities of life if all I've had up to this point are black teachers, black teammates, and they've, now in a new world, so they've got to do some adaptation and adjustment themselves, as do their teammates, as do the faculty and staff at the universities that they're attending. But it opened up a whole new world to these young men who came from segregated environments to more integrated environments. And if you look at the pathway of many of them, one example, Michigan State, the NFL draft of 1967, the top 10 players in that draft, four of them were from Michigan State. Bubba Smith was the number one draft. He went to the Baltimore Colts, as you remember.
Mhm.
He was the number one draft in 1967. I think Clint Jones he was a second pick. Gene Washington and George Webster were four of the top 10 picks in that draft. Uh, from Cleveland, he came from southern states. So it really showed that a team that was led by a coach who was willing to bring in players from anywhere. And if a Southern school didn't want them, I'll take them. And they became All-Americans, became very successful in the NFL and had good careers after they left the NFL. So it was a good opportunity for all of them to learn and grow.
Do the young men did the men talk about what the adjustment was for them? we're still talking the United States in the 1950s. What was that adjustment coming from the Deep South, coming north, coming west? What was that like for them? What kind of adjustments did they have to make on the ground?
Well, if you look at it and you figure you're a young black kid from Texas or South Carolina, you come to Michigan State, 50s and 60s, you might have a white roommate, right, in the dorm. Uh, and that was probably the first experience that they had in really relating to a white person as an equal, as a roommate. Their interaction growing up in Texas or South Carolina, very little meaningful interaction with white folks. And generally, it was at that point in our history, we had to kind of bow our head, you know. We had to, if a white person came walking towards us, we had to walk out the sidewalk so they could walk down the sidewalk. We had to walk in the street. So you come to Michigan State, you come to UCLA, you have white roommates, and Lord help us if you have a white girlfriend. That still might be problematic back then. But but
I'm laughing because I'm thinking of the conversation that you had when you were at CU, what, a decade later.
right,
That was very similar to that
yeah,
kind of experience, and then how coaches did or did not handle that.
right. And then you're adjusting to a coach. I mean, in the examples of the young men coming from the South, they generally had black coaches, right? They had black principals. So they get to a school in the North, you generally got white coaches because we weren't too integrated in terms of our coaching staffs at that point. And Michigan State again kind of led in that arena as well. But so they had to adjust to how do I interact with a coach, a white coach? Have had nothing but black coaches. How do I interact with a white roommate? Now I'm around all these white co-eds. How am I supposed to act? Yeah, can I ask one of these girls out for a date? And sometimes that might not be the best thing to do in terms of how you're viewed in the community, how you're viewed on campus, and then how that young lady is viewed, by her peers if she's willing to date a black guy. So there's all kinds of social interactions and social adjustments that they had to make coming from a predominantly black environment to a predominantly white environment where there's more mixing among the races than they experienced where they came from. And still have to, there's scholarship athletes, so there's pressure there to succeed, not only on the field, but to stay eligible, to be, to do your classwork and stay eligible. So there's all kind of ranges of changes that they had to make in their thinking, moving from a segregated environment to a more integrated environment.
Now, how do they do on the field? There are names that you've given me that, the Bubba Smith, Gene Washington, who I had the honor to meet a few years ago, um, Jimmy Ray, people, how did they do on the field? Because, at the end of the day, that's what folks are going to be looking at. Well, yeah, they got all these guys in, but did they win?
Well, yeah, they did win. Michigan State was very successful with that core group, and Michigan State in 1966, November's 1966, the game of the century, November 10th, 1966, Notre Dame at
10,
Spartan
10.
Stadium. I was there. A very cold November day. I was in the stands. Michigan State, you look at the starting defense and offense, out of the 22 guys, Michigan State had 13 black starters. Notre Dame had one. Alan Page, very, very, very accomplished in his own right, but that was the one black starter on Notre Dame in that game of the century, 1966, that ended up a 10-10 tie. Duffy Daugherty was the coach of Michigan State. Ara Parseghian was the Notre Dame coach. That was the game of the century. Then look at 1971, another game of the century. Nebraska versus Oklahoma. Johnny Rodgers, Nebraska, Greg Pruitt, Oklahoma. Who were the coaches? Two Duffy Daugherty disciples, Bob Devaney at Nebraska, Chuck Fairbanks at Oklahoma. That was considered a game of the century, right?
That little sideline, those were the only two teams to beat us that year, to beat Colorado that year.
Right, right.
That was the year that Oklahoma, Nebraska, and Colorado finished 1, 2, and 3.
Right. That was a very historic year for the Big Eight then
Hmm.
that year. But the like I said, the two disciples, Nebraska and Oklahoma,
Hmm.
were Duffy Daugherty disciples.
Hmm.
And Chuck Fairbanks eventually became head coach at the University of Colorado.
Hmm.
And then one of the stories that we tell in terms of your question about achievement, in terms of a University of Colorado story, the 1961 Colorado team was a very good team. They were captained by Joe Romig, who ended up being a Rhodes Scholar, All-American. He's from Lakewood, went to Lakewood High School, Lakewood, Colorado. He was the captain of that team, and so they were a very good team. They had played in Miami earlier that year. I think they beat the University of Miami at the Orange Bowl. When they went on that trip, they had five black players on the team. Again, going back to that, we're only going to have a certain number of black guys. They had five black players: Bill Harris, Teddy Woods, Al Hollingsworth, and a couple of other guys. Uh, they had five black players, and when they went to Miami during the season game, the black players could not stay in the same hotel or eat at the same restaurant as the white players. And so, fast forward, they win the Big Eight conference. The Orange Bowl extends an invitation for the University of Colorado to come and play in the 1962 Orange Bowl in Miami. Uh, they the players reflect on that experience being there a few months earlier, and they say to Sonny Grandelius, who's the head coach, and in Sonny's instance, he is a Duffy Daugherty disciple. He grew up in Muskegon, Michigan, my wife's hometown. He
Hmm.
was a high school All-American running back at Muskegon Heights High School. Went to Michigan State, where he was a All-American running back. Played in the NFL for a few years, and came back to be on Duffy's staff as an assistant. Then at age 29, he became the head football coach at the University of Colorado, and he recruited a lot of guys from Michigan to play at the University of Colorado. But anyway, so with the players thinking about, well, when we went to Miami a few months ago, they wouldn't let the black players eat with us or stay with us. And they said to the coach, to Sonny, coach, I know it's a big deal to go to the Orange Bowl, but if the Orange Bowl is not willing to let us stay together, same hotel, eat together, we don't want to accept the offer to go to the Orange Bowl. That's a big deal, right? That's a lot of
Hmm.
money, a lot of prestige. So Sonny went and consulted with the athletic director, Dal Ward, and they came back and said, you know what? We support you guys. We'll convey the message to the Orange Bowl officials that if we accept your offer, then we got to stay at the same hotel, we got to eat the same restaurants, and they convey that message. The Orange Bowl officials kind of went away and thought about it and came back and said, "Okay, we agree." Uh, and that was one of the first really progress steps of integration in Miami as a city. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
When they agreed,
Yeah.
okay, we'll let the black players stay with the white players in the hotel and eat with them as long as you guys accept our offer to come and play in the Orange Bowl. So that's
Did you
one of
get
the
a
stories that we tell.
Did you get a sense of what drove Miami's decision? Was it embarrassment? Was it money? What from what you saw was the reason Miami said yes when maybe they wouldn't have said yes another time?
Well, one, you kind of had a contractual relationship between the Orange Bowl and the Big Eight Conference. So if you have the Big Eight Conference champions saying, for these reasons, which are basically social justice reasons, right?
Hmm.
We're not going to accept your offer. That becomes a big deal for the conference as well. So I say CU agreed, but it was also the conference that sided with CU because they knew it was a big deal as well. We want to send our conference champion to the Orange Bowl. CU is the conference champion. They're
Hmm.
making certain demands on you, and uh, if you don't adhere to the demands, we agree with them that they won't send their players to play. And so I think that it was both the social pressure from the conference, the economic pressure, probably the networks became aware of what was going on and intervened, and just the kind of progress. that we had made in other parts of the country in terms of integration. Isn't it kind of stupid that 1962 in Miami, a major city like Miami, that black folks got to stay in a separate hotel than white folks? So I think it was the combination of those things just put pressure on the city of Miami and the Orange Bowl to kind of relent and agree that we'll let them stay together.
Now, at the same time this was going on, I believe this, if correct me if I'm wrong, at the same time this was going on, UCLA made a similar stand regarding the Orange Bowl. Am I right on that one?
The Rose Bowl.
Yeah, around Orange Rose Bowl. I apologize, but the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, it was again the 1962 Rose Bowl where UCLA, I think it was UCLA was the Pac-10 champion, and by contract, if those of you who remember, bowls basically were contracted with conferences. So the Rose Bowl is like the Pac-10 and the Big Ten, right? So the
Hmm.
Big Ten champion would come out, and even in those days, if you won the Big Ten championship 2 years in a row, you couldn't come out the Rose Bowl 2 years in a row, and that applied to Michigan State because they were a two-time champion, and they couldn't go in '66; they went in '65. But in the instance of the Rose Bowl, there was a contract that the Rose Bowl featured the champion of the Big Ten against the champion of the Pac-10. Bear Bryant, again, the specter of Bear Bryant, but Bear Bryant wanted to bring his team to the Rose Bowl, because his conference basically kind of Sugar Bowl, right? That was
Hmm.
a Sugar Bowl contract. But the Rose Bowl was the granddaddy of them all. They call it the
Right.
granddaddy of them all. So he had a good team. 1962, the Alabama team, obviously, again, all white, right? But he wanted to try to, finagle a way for his team to come to the Rose Bowl to play in the biggest stage of the bowl games against UCLA. And so he was trying to maneuver his way. And then Jim Murray, who's a sports writer with the LA Times, kind of wrote an article about it, which kind of exposed this underhanded way that Bear Bryant was trying to get Alabama to the Rose Bowl. So that kind of undermined his effort to bring his team, his all-white team, to the Rose Bowl, and it enabled the contract between the Pac-10 and the Big Ten to be not be violated, because basically Bear Bryant was trying to figure out how to violate that Rose Bowl contract. But Jim Murray had enough reach and enough power as the LA Times sports writer that he kind of exposed that, and it didn't happen.
And again, I look at the time period, all this was going on. I'm thinking around that time, at least somewhere near that time, when the AFL was playing, they had what an all-star game. They
Right.
had the same thing where they were treated badly.
Yeah.
The coaches or the players decided we're not going to play in if we're staying in separate hotels, blah blah blah. You won't service,
Right.
and they ended up I think moved that game to Houston. Meanwhile, um, Bill Russell and Woody Salisbury were involved in a game in Kentucky around the same time.
Yep.
Again, with separate accommodations, all of that, not being treated well.
Right.
And literally, Russell took the black players from the Celtics. Woody took the black players from St. Louis. They all left
Yep.
and left them, to fend for themselves.
Yep.
Um, so there was a lot going on in the country in terms of black folks saying, no, this is enough. This is the era of people sitting at lunch counters and all these other types of things, and not wanting to sit at the back of the bus anymore. Could you throw a little? I guess I'm saying that already, but could you throw what your sense of that era is in terms of the context? Because it wasn't just on the field we saw it everywhere in black society.
Well, yeah, that was part and parcel of American society at that point, where we were coming out of the 1950s, the importance of Brown versus Board of Education, into the 60s with the Vietnam War, the civil rights movement, social unrest, uh, riots, or we're going to call them, the assassination of the King, April 4th, 1968, Bobby Kennedy, June 1968. So it was a very, very tumultuous time. And so if you were a sports figure, Whether you were a college athlete or a pro athlete, you had to tread water in terms of how much of a social activist
Mhm.
would you want to be. Bill Russell, I always give him a lot of credit because he was very much a social activist, as was Jim Brown,
Mhm.
as was a young Lou Alcindor, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Because you remember the photo of that famous meeting when Ali had said he was not going to go to Vietnam, and you had that summit that they had. I think it was in Cleveland, and that famous photo with Ali and Jim Brown and Bill Russell. You know,
Willie Lanier and a few other, yeah.
yeah, young Lou Alcindor. And so to mix social activism with being a successful college athlete and pro at that time was very challenging. But the times demanded that because just like today, perhaps not as expanded as expansive as today, college and pro athletes have a platform. Uh, our young kids look up to them, whether young men or women looking up to college and pro athletes who are men and women themselves. They have a platform, and we still, have a lot of uh, social activism that is needed in our society today. And pro college and pro athletes are freer to express themselves than they were back then. You're really taking a risk back in the 50s, 60s, even up to the 70s to express yourself. And you would be, your coaches would call you in, if you were too much of a social activist. And those that were, we really need to give a lot of credit to whatever sport they were playing, whether it was baseball. Look at Kurt Flood,
Mhm.
Lou Brock. Look at basketball, Bill Russell. Because you go back and look at those winning Celtics teams, how many black players did they have on the Celtics team? You had Bill Russell, you had Sam Jones, you had Casey Jones, you had Tom Sanders, Willie
John Thompson was
Longley,
there for a cup of
John
coffee.
Thompson was a little there.
Yep.
But
Salisbury
basically,
was on one team. Yeah, there wasn't that many guys.
basically, you're talking about John Havlicek, Larry Siegfried, Tommy Heinsohn, Bob Cousy. So it's really where we were seeing the transition from basketball being kind of dominated by white guys, evolving to kind of 50-50 to where we are today, where it's pretty much 75, 80%, which is why I refer to the NBA as nothing but Africans. Uh, and then in that too, capturing how the game of basketball has spread to the
Yeah.
continent of Africa, right?
Yeah.
I mean, look at the number of players from Cameroon or Nigeria or other African countries that are NBA players
Mhm.
now,
Mhm.
and the investment that the NBA is making with the camps, basketball camps in Africa to take advantage of the talent that's there. Because
Yeah.
in terms of that question, when I was growing up in Denver, I used to have a couple of recurring dreams. One of them was I hoped for peace on earth, and so I would have one dream that we were being invaded by space invaders, and that's what united the nations of the world
Mhm.
to fight the space invaders. The other dream that I had as a nascent basketball player was I wanted to go over and recruit a team of Watusis to play in the NBA, so we'd have 6'9" point guards and 7'4" centers, and that dream came to be, I guess, right?
Then we got Magic, and then, then we got Manute and Hakeem,
Right, right.
but um, I do want to talk a little bit about the
Joel
other coaches. Oh,
Embiid,
the
Joel
Beeb. Oh yeah, my
Embiid,
God, yes.
Pascal Siakam.
And guys who were jumping out of the gym,
Right, right. So
Um,
that dream I had came true. The dream about space invaders and peace on Earth is still still. I'm
we're,
working
we're,
on
we're
that.
we're still working on that one.
We're working on that.
Well, I only have a couple more questions. Talk about some of the other coaches who came from that tree. You mentioned coaches at Oklahoma and Nebraska, Notre Dame, Houston, Arizona State, all these other coaches who came from the Doherty tree and the influence that they had.
Well, yeah, Dan Devine. Dan Devine went to Missouri. You remember Johnny Rowland played at Missouri.
Hmm.
He ended up being a coach at Notre Dame. You had Bill Yeoman went to Houston, Chuck Fairbanks, Oklahoma, and then Colorado. Then NFL with the New England Patriots. Frank Cush, Arizona State. Bill Yeoman, I think I mentioned him, Houston. So you had a whole Bob Devaney, I mentioned earlier, went to Nebraska, won a national championship with Nebraska. Sherman Lewis, who played in the NFL briefly. Jimmy Ray is an example because he was a quarterback and then he started his coaching career as an assistant at Michigan State. Then he moved on to the NFL, was an offensive coordinator. He had a 37-year career coaching in the NFL. He never became a head
Hmm.
coach, but he had a 37 career. And then you look at the fact that Jimmy Ray, a disciple of Duffy Daugherty, and who idolized him, Tony Dungy.
Yep.
And so even though Tony didn't, he was from Jackson, Michigan, but he didn't go to Michigan State. But in a sense, you can look at him as a kind of a disciple because he idolized Jimmy Ray, and then you look at what Tony's accomplished. Won the Super Bowl with the Colts when they were in Indianapolis with Peyton Manning, and basically a Hall of Fame career. So I kind of consider him in that as a
Hmm.
disciple too, even though he didn't go to Michigan State.
One last thing, personally for you, as you're pulling all this together, how because I find that that really good projects are a marriage of passion with opportunity, and it sounds like we're really seeing that with you. Talk about the passion for you in doing this.
Well, I'm a sports fan. I've played sports my whole life. I played, basketball, football, baseball, anything that's round, including football. I love sports, and I still do. I obviously can't really play like I used to play because I'm an old guy now. But I can still enjoy it. I'm looking forward to, like tonight, Boston Celtics. I'd like to see them dispose of the Mavericks and win their 18th championship. But I'm an African American kid who grew up in Denver, went to Denver East High School. I was probably the sixth or seventh African American kid to have a basketball scholarship to CU. And so I'm a pioneer in that sense, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
During that same era. And even though, I'm light skinned, so some people say, "Are you Jewish? Are you, what are you?" But people treat me as a black person. I carry myself as a black person. So I was treated as such when I was at the University of Colorado. And the whole dating thing was an issue. You don't be seen with a white girl, and wanting to succeed as an athlete, but also want to succeed as a student. So when Bijan Bain and Tom Shanahan approached me to get me involved in the project, and I knew the USC Bear Bryant story, and I knew it wasn't correct. So I said, I would love to get involved, figure out how I can pull other people into the project that can make it succeed, so that we can really tell an audience of people who are interested in football, interested in sports, and then people who maybe are not, but maybe are more interested in social issues, how integration occurred in the United States. That this is the story of how it happened, and to be able to give Duffy Daugherty his true credit, because even at Michigan State University, he doesn't get the kind of credit that he deserves from that particular university. This Colorado University 62 Orange Bowl story is a story that university doesn't really kind of embrace
Mhm.
as they should. And we got Coach Prime at University of Colorado now, so they're getting a lot of a lot of press, a lot of coverage. The program has improved, but this is an important story. That Orange Bowl story is an important part of how that program evolved to where it is today, where the CU football team now, I would imagine, is predominantly black, right?
Mhm.
Uh,
About 80, 85%, yeah. And that was
on
even
both
before Sanders showed up.
Right. So on both sides of the ball, you have predominantly black players. But it's at one point there were five.
Hmm.
They went to this. They went to the. They were invited to the Orange Bowl, and they said at the Orange Bowl, "We're not going to come unless everybody stays together and can eat together." And they were able to get the Orange Bowl to back down, which is a benchmark in terms of the integration of college football that the University of Colorado itself should be proud of and should be touting.
And there's one last CU memory that people probably don't even know about. What was it, 69 or 68 when they played Alabama in the Liberty Bowl?
Right.
Um, Big shootout. Colorado won the game. The next year was the USC game, but
Right.
Alabama had already lost to a team with a bunch of black players, or at least a few black players on there.
Right.
So in a way, Colorado may have been part of that push to get those schools down south to start to integrate. But people don't even know that story. We don't tell that story.
Right.
It
Right.
took a lot. If you hadn't told that to me, I wouldn't have even known to go look it up. And
Right.
those are things that we should know. I mean, when we talk about what any university can be, there are plenty of examples that can light the way. And one of the things that's why I'm so honored to talk to you, because you're showing ways that we can light the way. We always talk about what we should do is we should do that. Well, you're showing how people did do something.
Right.
And I think that's significant to know that we're building on something, not always starting from scratch.
Yeah. And the universities have an obligation. I mean, not talking about just the athletic department, but the university broadly, as you know, and the things that we're doing to try to get University of Colorado to be more responsive. But universities have an obligation, and oftentimes the face of that university, especially we're talking about major universities, is their athletic program, their football team, their basketball teams, and we need to know what the history and evolution of those teams is in terms of what has been the role of black players to build them to the point that they are now, where they're predominantly black. Whether you look at basketball or football, whether you look at Alabama or Colorado or Michigan State, they're predominantly black rosters that there's a history to how we got to this point in time.
Mhm. Now, when is the documentary? When do you plan to have it run, and where can people find you?
Well, it's still in development. We started some shooting. We did some filming, and when Tom was doing a book signing at Michigan State University, we were in Boulder on May 7th when he was doing a book signing there, and did some interviews there with John Meadows, who was on the 61 team, and Joe Romig, and did some B-roll in the Sports Hall of Fame with Bill Harris and Teddy Woods and Frank Clark and John Wood and some of the other black players and some of the other significant. So we've begun shooting. We're in the process of raising funds, because our goal is to be able to do this 4-part docuseries as a independent film, if you will, and then to take it to a major streamer or network where we retain the copyright to the film, as opposed to take it right to a series, to a network or a streamer, where they would then say, okay, we'll have the copyright. So we're in the process of raising the funds. We estimate it's for $1 million per episode. 4 episodes. We're started raising the $4 million that we need to produce it and post produce it and get it
How
on the
do
air.
how do people reach out to you if they would like to contribute or be supportive? What's the best way for folks to contact you? Where should we send them?
Well, our fundraiser is McCool Creative in Denver, and Matthew McCool is the owner of that, and then my partner Von Regensberger. Von's you can we don't have because we don't have a website or anything yet. It's really just responding to. We have a PR deck that we can share with people, or we have an investor deck that we're sharing with investors.
Mhm. Absolutely. Dr. Hart, man, thank you, my friend. I appreciate you. One of these days, I'm going to talk to you about the 20th Street Gym in Denver, but that's for another day.
That's a whole other story. Yeah, you're right.
Because the stories you can tell, and yeah, I heard you tell me you got the key.
Yes. I didn't have to knock. I didn't have to knock. I had the key. But and the list of names I can tell you who I played ball with at 20th Street Recreation Center in Denver, and you did have to knock to get in. If you
Hmm.
didn't have a game,
Just keep walking.
keep walking. Go to the barbecue joint across the street in West Texas.
Man, thank you again, brother. It's always good to talk to you.
Thank you, Matt.
I always end up a way smarter human being afterwards, brother. So thank you so much, man.
Thank you. So I'll get some the information, the material that you need to post with the podcast.
Sounds good. Thank you, my
Thank
friend. Be well.
you too. Bye
All right.
bye.
Bye.